The Premier League officially returns this weekend, and that means that it's time to do my yearly Premier League predictions, starting from 20th and going down to 1st, talking through each team's transfer business this summer and what are their chances for success this season. I'm going to get straight into it, starting with 20th place, and in 20th place I'm going for Southampton this year. Southampton got relegated in 22-23 and have since added the likes of Flynn Downs, Taylor Harwood, Bellis, Lallana, Charlie Taylor, all of which are decent championship players. They're okay, they're not great. Certainly not the kind of players that are going to keep you in the Premier League. You've got to remember as well, when they went down, they were the worst team in the league by quite a way. They got relegated by about 11 points, I think it was. And since then, the calibre of players they've brought in just aren't going to take them up another level and keep them up. They appointed Russell Martin last season, and he's a decent manager. He did a decent job at Swansea. He did a good job at them last year. He did well to get them promoted. He plays expansive football, but ultimately I think that'll be the undoing of him. In a similar way to Vincent Kompany, you just can't play that kind of expansive football when you've not got the players in this league. And so for me, Southampton almost guaranteed to get relegated. I've got them in 20th. In 19th place, I've got Leicester City. They were a shock relegation in the same year that Southampton got relegated. Since then, they've lost James Maddison, Keenan Dewsbury-Hall. Vardy is a year older than he was that year. The signing of Wilfried Zaha for them would be a massive boost to their survival hopes, although I still don't think they've quite got enough. I do think it benefited them the fact they lost Enzo Maresca to Chelsea. I think similar to Vincent Kompany last year, he's very stubborn in the way he plays. He's a Pep graduate. And like I just said with Southampton, that will be their undoing if they carry on like that. Steve Cooper, on the other hand, a very, very decent appointment. He's Premier League proven. He did a job at Forest, keeping them up in his first season. Obviously, he did get sacked last season. But yeah, I do think that's decent. The issue with Leicester as well is they've obviously got that points deduction looming over them. Could be 5 points, could be 10 points. We just don't know yet. That will have a massive impact on how they do this season. They do have a very generous end to the season though, and in my opinion, that could be a saving of them. But I do think they will just about not have enough. And so I've got Leicester City in 19th. Finishing off the bottom three, I've got the third promoted team. It's Ipswich. I've got all three promoted teams going down. Ipswich, however, I do think are the most likely to stay up. They've done well in doing what Burnley didn't do last season. They've signed their loan players like Hutchinson on a permanent deal from Chelsea. So there's not too much change going on in that squad. I also like what they've done with the signings of Kiefer Moore and Liam Delap. It's a good mix of experience, but it's also got the potential of Delap, which I think could be really interesting this year. I really want to see how he does it in the Premier League this year. The signing of Muric is also decent. He's a proven Premier League goalkeeper. Did very well when he came in for James Trafford last season. However, after all of that, I still don't think that'd be quite good enough. I would love to be proven wrong with Ipswich though. Next up, just avoiding the drop, I've got Brentford. Brentford have been extremely consistent in the Premier League since their arrival 3 years ago, but they have been on a gradual decline since their initial arrival. I think last season, Tony especially was slightly disappointed with his return. Obviously, he missed the start of the season, but I think everyone expected him to get more goals than he did in the second half of the season. There's also a chance that he does leave before the end of the summer, although that does look unlikely now. I do think his contract's up at the end of the season, so it might be a case of just waiting for that to run out for him. It does kind of feel like Brentford's time is starting to run out. Every year now, it feels like we get a little bit close to the end of the season before they pull themselves out of that relegation battle. And for me, the lack of signing of them is a real concern. The Carvalho signing's okay, but he's far from Premier League proven. He didn't do well at Liverpool particularly. He obviously did well on loan at Hull last year, and he did well originally at Fulham, but he's still yet to prove himself in this league. That being said, he's more than capable of bagging a few goals, getting a few assists here and there, and being a major part. And he might connect with Tony really well, and he could end up being what keeps them up. Moving on into 16th, and for me, the last team that's going to be involved in the relegation scrap this year, I've gone with Nottingham Forest. It's another year for Forest of signing players that aren't proven in the Premier League, sort of from other leagues. They've done it a lot recently, and so far it's worked for them. Every year they've just about avoided the drop. As of right now, it looks like they're going to keep hold of Morgan Gibbs-White, which I think is really, really good business for them, and almost the most important business they've done all summer. I think Nuno's a pretty decent manager. I think he's good enough to keep them up. In his time at Wolves, he did a very, very decent job. But much like Brentford, I think there is a possibility that they do end up going down this year. I do think they will be in a relegation scrap. I think we're more based on whether Ipswich and Leicester do badly, rather than Forest and Brentford doing the work to keep themselves up. Next up, I'm going to go on to 15th, 14th, 13th and 12th, all of which could kind of swap around. I've gone Bournemouth in 15th, Wolves in 14th, Everton 13th and Fulham 12th. Like I said, all of these clubs could very easily swap. I put Bournemouth bottom of this group simply because I don't know how they'll react without Solanke. That's a lot of goals to lose. We obviously don't know how they're going to replace him as of yet. 60 million was a good fee for them though, and so if they spend the money wisely, I'm sure they'll be more than fine. If they can't replace him though, they may find themselves slipping towards that Forest, Brentford, Ipswich side rather than pushing towards 12th. Wolves, I would say, are pretty much bang on 14th. They are such a 14th club this year. They're very, very safe. I can't see them getting dragged into a relegation battle. They've got a solid manager, but their transfer window has been pretty underwhelming. Their squad's pretty underwhelming. There's nothing too special about it. Everton, again, I'd say a very safe team under Dyche. We don't know if they're going to get another point deduction this year. That obviously might bring them towards the relegation zone once again. But I think given it's good as since last year, I've got a feeling that will drag them through in the home games. And as well, Dyche is just a very, very good manager for that level. And then finally, with Fulham, they've made some very exciting signings this summer. They've signed Smith Rowe, they've signed Brozier, and they've got Sessegnon back at Fulham. And so it'd be nice to see Fulham maybe push forward a little bit this year, try and push the sort of top half of the table, which they're very capable of doing. But equally with Fulham, it could go the other way. The signings could not quite work out because they aren't exactly proven, and we could see them slip towards the lower half of the table. However, I do think they'll be safe, and I do think they'll come 12th this season. Next up, I think 11th and 10th are pretty much set in stone. I think either could swap, but I've got Palace in 11th and Brighton in 10th. Palace ended last season fantastically. Glasner came in and it was a revelation for them when he replaced Hodgson. They have lost Elise though. He could be on his way out to Newcastle. Anderson is also linked with other clubs, and has also been recently talked that City could trigger Eberici Eze's release clause. This could all be quite a big issue for Palace as they've not really looked to replace players at the moment. I do also think they're relying on Mateta hitting the same form that he was in at the end of last season, which is definitely no guarantee. But who knows, if he does manage to keep that form for an entire season, we could be looking at 17, 18 goals next season. Ultimately, Palace's season will completely depend on who ends up leaving before the end of the transfer window, and if they can replace them, who they replace them with. And then I go with Brighton in 10th, who are very much an uncertainty this year. They've got the youngest manager in the league, who no one really knows anything about. They've made a lot of signings, they've spent a lot of money this summer, much more than usual, and they haven't lost any of their big players this year. And for me, this Brighton prediction is a complete guess, and I've done it solely based on the fact that Brighton get it right far more often than they get it wrong. And so with Brighton, I'm going to trust the process. I'm going to say they're going to finish just above Palace, but I think those two teams will be battling out for 10th and 11th. Although equally, I think both teams are capable of hitting form and potentially doing even better than I've predicted. In 9th place, I've gone for West Ham United, who have had a very, very solid window. They as well have spent decent money, and they have backed the new manager, Lopetegui, very, very well, who again is a very decent manager. Didn't have the best of times at Wolves, but you don't manage the likes of Spain and Real Madrid if you're not a well-qualified manager. West Ham also have no Europe this season to distract them, so full focus on the Premier League, and it would not surprise me one bit if we still have gone on a very good cup run. Potentially even a Carabao Cup for them this season, who knows. The only issue with West Ham is we've seen them spend big money before, get a new exciting manager in, and it just turns toxic very quickly if it starts badly. I think it happened under Pellegrini. Everyone tipped them to do quite well, and they ended up far closer to the bottom of the table than the top of the table. And with a team like West Ham, that's always possible. But I do think they will come top half of this year, and it wouldn't surprise me if they even get a potential return to Europe this year. Next up in 8th place, I've gone for Newcastle, which in my opinion would be a failure for them. And I think this would result in Eddie Howe getting sacked, which I really, really can see this season. They've had a pretty underwhelming window so far this year. Not really signed anyone of note. They are linked with Guehi. Not that I think he'll change too much. I think FFP is really restricted to Newcastle at the moment, and so I can see them getting stuck in 8th. For me, they've got to get Europe this year though, or a trophy. Any less for them is failure. In 7th place, I've gone for a slight drop off for Aston Villa. That being said, I would say this would be a successful season for them. The additional games of the Champions League this year for them will prove to be a little bit too much, although that being said, I do think they will get to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. I think they have had a solid window and they're starting to build a squad rather than just the first 11. The loss of Moussa Diaby and Douglas Luiz is a bit of a blow for them, but I think they've replaced them well with the likes of Ian Matson, Ross Barkley, Amadou Onana. Like I said, for Villa this year, they just need to qualify for Europe and do decent in one of the cup competitions, and I'd say it's a success. What is definite is if they get Europe this year, for me, Villa are here to stay. Next up in 6th place, I've gone for Manchester United, another pretty underwhelming season for them. They've had a pretty decent window, to be fair. De Ligt and Yoro have both very decent signings, shoring up that back line, which got pretty weak towards the end of last season with all the injuries. Big issue for United, though, they've still got no guaranteed goals. Hoyland's yet to really prove himself, and that Zerki is far from proven once again. I'm also still unsure on Ten Hag. I've got a feeling he does get sacked, and my bold prediction for this year is that Ruud van Nistelrooy will be Manchester United manager by April. Next up in 5th place, I've gone for Chelsea, and this could really go either way. They could end up in 10th place this year. They could equally end up in 3rd place if all goes well. They've made far too many signings to be able to make an accurate prediction on this Chelsea team, but my logic behind putting them in 5th and ahead of Manchester United and Aston Villa is they had a very, very good end to last season, and despite the change since then, they've still got very good players, the likes of Palmer, Neto, potentially signing Osimhen. They've got Enzo, Casido, Lavia. They've got a lot of good players, and for me, there's too many good players in there to not be able to have a good season. I'm not too sure on Enzo. I do think he might end up getting sacked. But again, who knows? Maybe with the high quality players, he will perform well with his system. But yeah, I think Chelsea might surprise a few this season. I think they might end up winning a trophy. Definitely the Conference League is obviously one for them to go for. But yeah, like I said, Chelsea just a big unknown this season. That moves us on to the top 4. And I'm going to start off with 4th place, Tottenham Hotspur. Under Angela's season, they slightly dropped off towards the end and they just missed out on top 4 to Aston Villa. My reasoning behind putting Spurs in 4th this year is that all the other clubs around them have got a lot of change. Villa have got Champions League football, Chelsea got a new manager, loads of signings. United is still sort of in their process. Liverpool have got a new manager, but Tottenham have just stayed steady. They've stayed the same. They've got the same manager. No major changes. They've added Solanke, which is great business. I think Kulusevski will have a very good season, unlike last season. And I wouldn't bet against Spurs winning a trophy this year, especially with the Europa League not having anyone coming down from the Champions League this year, it wouldn't surprise me to see them go and win that. Then moving on to third place, I've gone for Liverpool. I do think the fact they've got a new manager that none of us really know that well does create a bit of unpredictability. On top of all of this, they've had a pretty underwhelming window. They've just missed out on Zubimendi. They're still looking for a 6, but that looks unlikely now. And so by the looks of it, they're going to go into the season with pretty much the same squad they had last season. That being said, that squad they had last season is still much better than all the teams behind them, in my opinion. The likes of Salah, Trent, Jota, Van Dijk, Alisson, they're all players that are more than capable of dragging Liverpool to top 4 this year. And so for me, it'll be third, although I don't think they'll be in any sort of title race like they were last year. And so that takes us on to the top 2. And in second place, once again, for the third consecutive season, Arsenal. I do think Arsenal will once again push City right to the end of the season, and it would not surprise me one bit if on the final day of the season both teams are still in with a shout at the title. But I just think Arsenal miss out again. They have a very, very hard start to the season that involves Aston Villa away, Manchester City away, and Tottenham. I can't remember if it's home or away. If they can come out of those first 5 games with 13, even 11 points if they draw at City, I think they'd be very, very happy, and I think that would be a very, very good foundation for them to start the season on. I'm unsure about the signing of Calafiori. I don't know enough about him to make an accurate prediction on whether he'll succeed or not, but I'm equally not sure that adding a defender is going to make too much difference to their season, given how good they were defensively last year already. They also have Timber back for the entirety of this season should he stay fit. He is a much better left-back option than the likes of Kivior or Zinchenko. I still think they're lacking a striker though, as I don't think Havertz and Jesus are quite that. And ultimately, I think that will be what stops them winning the league this season. And that takes us on to Manchester City. I think it's 5 in a row this year. A historic, seismic moment in the club's history. Potentially Pep's last year. I think he will probably bow out at the end of this year. And so maybe this will be the last year of winning the title for a few years, because that transition is going to be a lot. But I do think we will win it this year. I think when you look at last year, there's so many areas that we're going to improve on this year that I think will be the difference. Our record against the Big Six was horrendous last year. We only got 1 point from 6 against Arsenal. Almost certainly will improve on that this year. The likes of Doku, Grealish and Holland, I'm sure will all have better seasons this year. We've also got Savio coming in, who looks great. And I'm sure in the second half of the season when he's back, Oscar Bob will have a huge impact. De Bruyne will also not be injured for 6 months, fingers crossed. All of that being said though, I do still think we need to sign a Rodri replacement. We saw last year how poor we looked when he was suspended or injured. And we really can't rely on him playing 60 games once again this year. So that is needed, and if not, an injury to a Rodri-like player could cause a complete change in our season and ultimately might give the upper hand to Arsenal. Anyways, that's my predictions for this season. Leave your predictions in the comments down below. Let me know what you think for the upcoming season. I'd love to know. I will be at Chelsea on Sunday. There will be a matchday vlog for that, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Thank you for watching. Leave a like, subscribe if you're not already, and I'll be back on Sunday. Goodbye.